Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer and Amazon #1 best-selling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, visit my websites and sign up for my newsletter where you can find out even more great information and practical tips about how you can be healthy naturally. Now, today we're going to be talking about mold. Now, as a medical intuitive healer, when I'm doing a medical intuitive reading, I read 5 levels of your being. What's going on with your physical body? What's going on with your energy system, which includes your chakras, your breath, and your acupuncture system. I'm reading your emotional body. What's going on with your emotions that are contributing or maybe keeping your illness or disease in place? What's going on in your mind? What are the thoughts and beliefs that are holding your wellness back? And finally, what's going on the spiritual level? When I am doing medical intuitive readings, I'm looking at all the factors that are affecting your health. Now, one factor that we're going to be talking about today that many people overlook is their environment. Now, we have to remember that your environment is the most powerful factor. If, as many of you know, if you visited catherinecarrigan.com, I'm a big fan of orchids. Now, those of us who are gardeners and who take care of plants, we understand that environment is the most powerful factor. You're very much like an orchid in that your well-being is directly affected by the health of the environment that you live and work in. Now, many people who are sick or suffering chronic illness, they spend a lot of time running lab tests, running from one doctor to another or one practitioner to another, trying to find answers, but they're not really looking at their overall environment. And as a medical intuitive healer, I frequently have found over the years that mold has been a major contributing factor to illness and disease. And I frequently talk to my clients about how their home environment and how their work environment is affecting them and what you can do to help your health be improved by improving your environment. Now, this goes beyond feng shui. I am a major fan of feng shui, and I'm frequently recommending feng shui to my clients. But there's a difference if you are living in a moldy home or a moldy office that goes way beyond feng shui. Now, here today to talk about mold is my guest, and my guest is Mara Landis. Mara is the founder of Nutmeg Aspirin, and you can find out more about Nutmeg Aspirin at nutmegaspirin.com. And this is a platform for people to share whatever works for well-being. Welcome, Mara Landis.
Thank you, Catherine, for having me. I have to say, if you saw me nodding like this to everything that you're saying, check, 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 check. So thank you. Thank you for telling the world about what mold can do to you and raising awareness.
Now, Mara, here at the Natural Healing Show, our listeners are looking for solutions that work to help them be healthy and happy naturally. Can you share for our listeners what exactly is Nutmeg Aspirin?
So Nutmeg Aspirin is a platform for anybody to share whatever works when it comes to feeling, getting, and being better. So we are completely user-generated content. We want to know what you are doing. Like, we all have these little experiences, whether it's healing a headache, to healing stage 4 cancer, to healing mold. And we need to crowdsource what everybody's doing so that we can all share in this wealth of information. And at Nutmeg, we like to say that we value experience, not just expertise.
That's a great explanation. And again, for our audience, you can go to nutmegaspirin.com and take advantage of this wonderful information that Mara Landis is putting together. Now, here today, we're talking about mold. Now, one of the things that we have to understand is, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, anytime the humidity is over 50%, you are going to have mold. Now, mold can affect literally any level of your being. And this high humidity situation is found in lots of places. Here in Atlanta, Georgia, where I live and work, it's regularly over 50% humidity outside on a normal basis. And mold is not necessarily something that you can see. So a lot of times you may, if you have bugs in the house, for example, you may notice roaches crawling around, or ants, or some other critters that are rolling around. But Mara's had personal experience with mold. And so I want to ask Mara, how, from your experience, how can toxic mold adversely affect your health?
It's a huge sigh in me because I had no clue what was wrong with me. So I have a laundry list of symptoms. When you talk about running from doctor to doctor, getting tests and tests and tests, that was me. But it was me at a period of time where nobody understood how environment can impact the body. So my mold situation happened starting in 2005. And for 2 years, my family, we all had crazy symptoms. Mine started with severe headaches, and I'm not someone who's prone to headaches. And then it started with, became horrible mood swings. And then I couldn't sleep at night. I couldn't get out of bed in the morning. I started having terrible itchy legs. I was just scratching myself raw. Then the brain fog started. So every morning I'd wake up and all of a sudden I'd feel like this fuzziness came over my head. I felt like I was perpetually stoned, but with none of the good stuff of being stoned, no laughing. I couldn't remember what I did yesterday. My brain couldn't register a green light as go. I mean, it was just the opposite. I registered green as red and red as green. I had sensory issues. My fine motor was affected. I was shocking people left and right. My kids thought that was kind of funny because mom was always getting shocked. And of course, when you go to the doctors, they prescribe an antibiotic or they prescribe an antidepressant. They think you're crazy and they think that you're a complete hypochondriac. And I knew I wasn't crazy. I knew I wasn't a hypochondriac, and I'm not a pill popper. I've never been. But I took the antibiotics. I also had some sinus infections. I walked into a glass wall, so they thought I had a concussion, but I now know I walked in the glass wall because all my perceptions and depth perceptions were off. And they gave me antibiotics. They thought I had Lyme disease, so I took those. I took the antibiotics for my sinus infections. And then there were other things going on. My children, my oldest had strep throat 11 times in 1 year. My middle son was extremely low tone and speech delayed. And my youngest was a baby at the time, but he now has ADD. And I know that it relates back to his time just living in this toxic soup of mold. My husband lost about 20 pounds that he didn't need to lose, and he had a lot of anxiety attacks. So there obviously was something going on with our home, but if you go back to that period of time, there was nothing on the internet. And it wasn't until someone read an article or was a story about someone with mold, they said, oh my God, this is Mara. And it was at that point, after 40 plus doctors being passed around because we were in the gray area of medicine, did we think to test her home. And sure enough, we had very high levels of Stachybotrys and Aspergillus. So then I went back to my current doctor at the time and I said, oh my God, it's mold. What do we do? And he said, I don't know what to tell you. So I was completely on my own. And there was another thing that he said to me. I don't know what to tell you, but you'll probably have your symptoms the rest of your life. So I'm a basket case of fear. I am like losing my mind. I have 3 small children. I have to hold it together for my family. And serendipitously, around this time, let me backtrack. We remediated the mold. And I have a lot to say about remediation. We hired a team. We brought in the experts. They put the hazmat tape around our apartment. This was, toxic, and nobody could come in. They cleansed every single nook and cranny of the apartment. We threw away carpet. Turned out we had leaks in my bedroom and had gotten into the carpet. We had a water pipe burst into our kitchen. So we definitely had leaks. I just didn't deal with them properly. But this is the thing, and I think it's really important to be aware of this. When you get your final test results, there is always going to be pathogens in your home. It's almost impossible to get the ... saying there's nothing there. My team gave me the ... saying nothing was there when they were finished. We moved back into our home, and I started to not feel well again, and particularly in my kids' area. So I called my insurance agent, and they fortunately paid for all the cleanup. I got very lucky because it was very expensive. And I said, I don't trust the people who, did my cleanup. Who should I use? Who should I call to test? So I apologize for the phone ringing. But anyway, I used people who the insurance company recommended. They came in and tested, and sure enough, we still had mold. And then I said to them, who do you recommend for me to use to clean up? So I got this new team in, and they said, there's something about your kids' area that we think there might be something in the floorboards, just on a hunch. Would you mind if we rip up the floor? And I was like, they could have just taken apart the whole apartment for all I cared. I just wanted to get better. So they ripped up the floorboards, and underneath the floorboards was a paper liner that was soaked through with mold. So interestingly, and this is the serendipity of it, because you are a healer, I know that you'll love this part of my story. Around the same time that I had the second team in who discovered the mold again, a friend of mine said, my spiritual healer is coming in from Hong Kong. I live in New York City. It was her first visit to New York. Do you want an appointment? And this is someone that she had tried to get me to go see, particularly after 9/11, when I was racked with fears and like Chicken Little, thinking the sky was falling. And I kept on saying, no, I don't need a psychic. I don't need a healer. I don't buy into any of this. But when you hit rock bottom, you'll try anything. And I was like, well, I'll just come into New York. Why not? So I go see this woman, and she kind of reads my whole package. But I said to her, we want to sell our apartment. And she said, you couldn't sell your apartment if you wanted to, because the water stagnation brings a really low form of spiritual energy. You need to cleanse the energy in the apartment. Now, this was gibberish to me. And I said, I can't cleanse the energy in the apartment. I don't even know what you're talking about. Will you do this for me? And then she reads me and she says, we're going to take your whole package and we're going to soften you. And we're going to start with judgment. And I come from that uber type A Jewish family, very intense, very driven. And when she said the word judgment, it was like, yeah, I am really judgmental. And she explained the like draws in like, and my judging others would draw in that like energy. I get on her massage table. She doesn't touch me. She goes into her meditative space. But I felt this force go in my body, and it was like this electricity, like someone was ripping my face off. And the half hour that I was in this trance-like space, she then told me to open my eyes. And within a second, all I noticed was the sunlight coming in. She then said, feel into your body. And I felt like the 1,000-pound weight of anxiety was taken off of me. So for someone who came from this like very in the box, very mainstream world, I had this transformative experience. And I felt so fundamentally better that I said, can you meet with my husband at 5 o'clock, come home to the apartment, cleanse the energy in our apartment. And that was the day that marked the start of my healing. And I'm happy to discuss all I've done to heal, because I now like to refer to myself as the healing human guinea pig. But this has been a journey, and the silver lining of the journey is that it has awakened in me an insatiable curiosity. And I got better. It took a lot of hard work and determination, but I got better. And now I just want everybody else to know that they can get better too.
Okay. Now, I want to share a story from some clients that I've worked with over the years who have had mold. And one of the stories that I can share with our audience is a very special story about a young man. He'd been sick since the day he was born. And the story of how he came to me was quite interesting. One day he was standing in his front yard, and he said a prayer. He was standing there holding his cell phone, and he looked up to the sky and said, "Dear God, please help me." Well, right about that time, the phone rang, and it happened to be a woman who was a feng shui master. And he talked to her. He told her what was wrong with him. And the first thing she said was you really need to call Catherine Carrigan. So he worked with me. He came to see me. And day one, I told him, I said, your problem is your home. Now, this young man, again, 19 years old, he had been he'd been in a mental hospital. He'd seen every kind of traditional practitioner you could think of, physical doctor, psychiatrist, psychologist. He was unable to go to school. He was lying in bed. He had chronic fatigue. He had, multiple symptom illness. And by the time that I was finished working with him, he could walk 8 miles a day.
Wow.
Now, one of the things that I said to him was, as you can imagine, I don't usually go to people's homes, but I said, I actually want to go to your home. So I went to his home, and I also brought in one of the top mold experts here in Atlanta. And they told him that he was lucky to be alive. They said it was the worst case of mold they'd ever seen. Now, in his case, what had happened was that years ago, their house had caught on fire. And of course, when your house catches on fire, who do you call but the fire department? And what does the fire department do? They douse everything with water. Very few people think about what happens as the aftermath of water that puts out the fire. A friend of mine was talking to me actually today about a house that's being built around the corner from him. And my friend was talking about how the wood frame had been put up and had been exposed to the elements for about 9 months. And then they put up the insulation, but they hadn't put in boards. So a lot of times you may think, well, I'm buying a new house. I bought this brand new house. It looks great on the inside. It must be healthy. And my friend was saying that there was standing water that was getting absorbed. So just because you buy a new house and that everything looks perfect on the outside does not mean that your house is actually safe. Now, I'm going to give you some suggestions about what I recommend my clients do. If I am doing a medical intuitive reading and I think they have mold, if you go to Amazon, you can get an AccuRite indoor humidity monitor for about $10. They're $8, $9, $10. And this is a little device that's portable. And I tell my clients, buy an AccuRite indoor humidity monitor. By the way, I get no kickbacks. I'm just sharing what I tell people to do. And test the humidity of each room in your house. And if the humidity is, again, over 50%, then more than likely you're going to have a mold problem. Now, lots of people, frequently, I got an email in the past month from somebody saying, Catherine, can you recommend, they wanted to put more moisture into the air. And I said, I don't recommend that you buy a humidifier. I find that there's so many problems with mold that what people actually need is a dehumidifier. So here in my house, I know I spent about $4,000 and I have a whole house dehumidifier. And it's really, really big. So again, if you have chronic health problems, chronic fatigue, you want to look at this. Now, the other thing that Mara didn't mention is anytime you have chronic sinusitis, even according to the Mayo Clinic, bottom line, you have mold in your nose. And there's another great company here in the US called Microbalance Health Products. And they have a wonderful sinus spray that helps eliminate the mold in your nose. Now, of course, this is also all about you, so you need to build up your immune system. If you're living in a moldy home, one of the things you're going to need to do is you're going to need to rebuild your immune system. A couple other stories related to mold. I had a client years ago who was she was an interior decorator, and she was having chronic itchy eyes. She'd been to every ophthalmologist she could think of. Nobody could help her dry, itchy eyes. And when I did a medical intuitive reading, I said, I believe that you have mold in your home. I recommended that she get an indoor humidity monitor and go from room to room and test. By the way, one of the most important rooms that you're going to need to make sure is very clean is your bedroom. Just because you're going to spend 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day in your bedroom, and possibly more if you're sick, if you're chronically sick. So you want to make sure that the humidity in your home is optimal and that your bedroom is free of typical allergens, including mold. So anyway, back to the interior decorator. I'm like, I'm sure your home is absolutely beautiful. She was one of the top interior decorators in Atlanta. But there's a difference between things looking good on the outside and being actually healthy on the inside. So chronic sinusitis is almost always related to mold, and itchy eyes, chronic fatigue, all sorts of mental emotional problems can be related to that. And again, if you're chronically tired or you always feel bad in an environment, you have to ask yourself, what is going on in my home? Now, Mara Landis, back to you. How can you tell if your home has toxic mold? What do you recommend to your friends who are looking at this issue?
Before I answer that, I do want to say my home was brand new. We had just renovated soup to nuts. And so, it can happen to anybody. And so I really appreciate, Catherine, all you're saying, because from someone who's been through it, I'm like, where were you, 12, 14 years ago? I really could have used you. And thank God, like if you research now and you Google, there's so much out there to guide you. But the problem is that the Western medical establishment hasn't quite been made aware enough that these symptoms are actually mold related. They're getting there. But so back to the question of what I would look for in a toxic home. Well,
yeah. And let me respond also to what you're saying. I did a medical intuitive reading within the past 6 months with I spoke to a young man's mother, and the young man had chronic fatigue. No one could make him better. And what was interesting, when I did a medical intuitive reading and I'm working with him remotely, I'm not actually on the location. What I told them was, I said, I believe that you have an underground stream in your basement.
Mm-hmm.
And I told the mother, I said, I do not think your son will get well until he actually leaves the house. Now, a dowser, I am trained in dowsing. So a dowser is someone who use dowsing rods or pendulums and can read underground streams. This can be a factor in both new and old construction. But again, it's something that a lot of people are not thinking about. But as I mentioned, sometimes, like Mara said, you may have new construction and it may be shiny and beautiful and perfectly decorated, but what's underneath? What's in your air ducts? And this is where you have to have, again, a real simple thing to start with is the AccuRite indoor humidity monitor for under $10. But then you can actually get mold test plates. The Microbalance Health Products company, you can actually purchase test kits to see if you've got mold in your home. But Mara, back to you. How do you recommend that people figure out if they've got mold in their home?
Sadly, it's a conversation I have often with people, and not necessarily because they're calling me saying, Mara, I think I have mold. They're calling me and saying, Mara, I'm getting strep throat every single month, or I have these sinus infections that aren't leaving. And the first thing I say to them is get your home tested for mold. The other thing is I'll come over because I am so sensitive to mold now that the second I walk into a home, I know when there's mold because my head gets foggy, my fingers get tingly. I just know. So a quick story about that is this summer I went to visit a friend at her beach house, and I had never been there before. And we hadn't really talked about the fact that she was not feeling well, but while I was visiting, she was telling me she wasn't feeling well, and I knew immediately she had mold. But it's a little bit of a testy, you have to be sensitive to the fact that you don't want to tell someone that their beautiful home that was just built and decorated has mold in it. And so I said to her, I think you need to get tested for mold. I feel it in here. I kind of smell it in here. And she said, oh, no, we've tested. We don't have it. I said, I don't know. My hunch is that you do. Didn't see her for a little bit. Ran into her about 2 weeks ago. And she said, you would not believe what happened. They ripped open a wall, and sure enough, we had mold. And now I am so much better. So my advice to people who are dealing with some type of chronic symptom is, find a specialist in your area and have them come in and do the air testing. That's kind of what you need to do. And then, if we want to talk about, what you can do to heal once you discover them, or even if you've had any type of leaks, like you should be on high alert for mold if you've had leaks, and make sure that you open up the walls, you dry things out, and you handle it properly. If you live in a home, you have to be extra careful because you have a basement. And basements, we know, are bastions for mold. And just because it's in the basement, and I'll let you talk about the mold spores and how they spread and how they can really wreak havoc on you, they move. And then one other point I want to make is that some of my friends will say, well, I don't have an allergy to mold. I didn't either. I had a sensitivity. And so there was something in my constitution that made me highly sensitive to mold, probably more than everyone else in my family, even though we were all affected. I had the kitchen sink of symptoms of mold. Everybody else kind of had they were in a box with their symptoms. And I'm asking you about this, that I've now learned I have a double methyl defect. Maybe that has something to do with my heightened sensitivity, but you being the medical intuitive, I'll let you speak to that.
Well, we have to understand that mold can affect literally any organ in your body, but organs that I know for sure that it's going to affect, it's definitely going to affect your liver. It's definitely going to affect your lungs, and it's definitely going to affect your sinuses, and possibly your brain, and definitely it's going to affect your energy level. So again, it takes a lot of energy to live in a toxic environment. And again, why spend thousands of dollars on lab tests about yourself when you need to start by asking yourself, is my home a healthy home? And again, if you're even thinking about buying a humidifier, unless you live in someplace like Arizona where it's just chronically dry, I would say think twice, because I wouldn't recommend that you do that. Now, Mara, if somebody has mold, one of the common mistakes people make is they go, well, I'm just going to get some bleach. But bleach is mostly water. Can you explain to our audience why using bleach will actually cause mold to grow?
So I'm not the expert, but from my understanding is that because it's water, and it's also not, bleach does not go, was it something like it doesn't really absorb in, or it's not supposed to penetrate. So it gives it a surface that makes you think it looks fabulous, but it doesn't mean it's gone underneath and gotten to the actual mold. So it might look good for 2 weeks, but then you'll start to see the mold come back. So you have this false sense of security with bleach. And from what I've read, because I didn't use bleach back then, I immediately got the mold experts and had them, do their job. From what I've read, you're going to make it worse with bleach.
Absolutely. Bleach will make it work. So if you do find that you have mold in your home or office, what has to be done to eliminate it?
See, this is the tough part, because once you find out that you have it, it's yay, I know what's wrong with me. And that's very empowering. But dealing with mold means you have to strip everything down. You need to get a great HEPA filter vacuum cleaner. You need to vacuum everything. You need to wash everything. You need to dry clean everything. If you might have to rip up your carpets like we did, we had to throw away window treatments. Again, I go back to the fact that the insurance paid for everything. We got so lucky. It's a very detailed process, and you have to protect yourself because these spores can travel. And so you want to make sure as you're cleaning all of this, you're not inhaling it and infecting yourself more. So I highly recommend. I mean, I know everybody can hire an expert, and not everybody's insurance is going to cover this, but you got to take it so seriously that you do all your homework and really do your research how to best remediate your home.
And I just as when you're talking about healing your home, this is very much like healing yourself, in that you have to go to the original cause. And again, it's so crucial, I feel, that people test the level of humidity in their home, because once again, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, if your humidity is over 50%, you will have mold. So one of the big recommendations that I have for people is that they get an indoor, a dehumidifier for their house. And this may be, you can definitely get room dehumidifiers if you have a small living space, such as an apartment. If you have a home, you can work with your heating and air conditioning people to get a whole house dehumidifier, which is what I have. And then once you have this dehumidifier, then on an ongoing basis, then periodically you want to actually test the humidity level to make sure that you're keeping the humidity below 50%, because otherwise you're going to have to, keep doing the mold remediation. And there are products that you can purchase. Again, I mentioned Microbalance Health products. And again, I'm not getting any kickbacks from any of these people, but they have mold candles that you can buy to burn in a specific area. If you have, so for example, a mold basement, and you can burn these mold candles, and they help to eliminate mold spores in the air. They also have a spray that you can spray on the walls of your basement. And believe it or not, a big source of mold is actually your clothes. And when you wash your clothes, you can add additives to your laundry that help eliminate the mold. But again, you may think, gosh, this sounds like a big project. Well, it is, but it's way better than taking a lot of medications that are not actually solving the original problem. And it's really way better than continuing to feel bad for decades on end, with no relief. So it's a big, big factor. Now, another thing that you have to do once you have been exposed to mold, like Mara was, it's very crucial that you rebuild your immune system. And one of the ways that I personally, as a medical intuitive healer, think about the immune system, and a good way for you to think about your immune system, it's like your bank or your tank. So when you have a fat bank account, if you make a few financial mistakes, you're still going to be okay. And when you have a strong immune system and you're surrounded by people who have the cold and the flu, you can stay healthy. So for example, in the wintertime, I do a lot of green powders. I eat chicken soup. I juice. I make vegetable soup. I rest. I meditate. I may take herbs for my immune system. But you want to really monitor your immune system. And if you've been exposed to mold for a long period of time, then you know for a fact that you're going to need to rebuild your immune system. So Mara, what did you do for yourself to rebuild your immune system after being exposed to mold?
So it's very interesting, the languaging you're using, which I'm nodding, and it resonates with me 150%, but not back then. So for me, I was on my own. I searched and searched the internet for other people's stories about what they did to heal themselves. I could find people who were impacted by mold, but I couldn't find Richie Shoemaker and Suzanne Summers and a lot of the big advocates on how to heal mold. They didn't exist yet. They hadn't had the problem yet. So I was on my own. So as I said, I had this experience with a spiritual healer. And so I joke and I say my healing journey went spirit, mind, and body. So I started from the emotional level and healing my emotions and really kind of working on the anxiety that all of this illness and fear and unknown produced. And during that time, because I was so struck in my first session with this woman, Jenny, I was like, anybody's got a healer. I mean, Catherine, I heard about you. I would have been calling you before the person could even finish their sentence. I tried every healer, every modality, every herb, supplement, you name it, whatever crossed my path, I tried. And what I learned was that some things worked and some things didn't. Some people were really good at what they did and some people really were not. So I learned discernment, but I did get better. And the key thing for my getting better is, one, getting out of the moldy environment and fixing our home. So your body will start to kick in and do what it needs to do for the immune system to reboot. I got rid of all chemicals in my home. So there were only all natural cleaning products. I don't care if my whites aren't so white. I don't care if my sheets aren't bouncy, soft and, or bounty soft. And I didn't want any scented candles, nothing in my home, because the chemicals really impacted me. Like, I still can't go into like an airport bathroom without gagging and feeling like I'm going to die because of the, noxious chemical, disinfectants. So I cleaned out the house of all that. And then my healer said to me at a certain point, okay, you're now ready to tackle your body. You need to change your diet and you need to go on a candida cleanse. And again, yeah, I know everything about candida now, but back then I was like, candida what? And she explained it's a yeast overgrowth in the body. And I had a lot of yeast in my body and I was dealing with like horrific yeast infections. And I went to a doctor who specialized in candida and treating candida because I wanted to be, I wanted to be guided with this. I didn't want to just kind of be like a little this, I didn't want to risk hurting myself. And he started me with nystatin. And I did a lot of nystatin to the point where it actually was too much. And I just knew myself. And that's another really key point, is that you have to trust yourself. You have to hone your instincts. Only you know how you feel, particularly when you're up against doctors who tell you you're psychosomatic and you're just having like typical female anxiety and are just putting you on Zoloft and Paxil, whatever else. Thank God I said no. But I know now what works for me and what doesn't. So when I went to this doctor, I said, okay, well, I think I have candida. And sure enough, I did. And I was doing the nystatin. He also put me on the diet. And the diet is no sugar, nothing that converts to sugar. So you don't have any bread. You don't have any corn. You don't have any sugar. You don't have any alcohol. You don't have any mushrooms that are fermented and can convert to sugar in the body. You don't have any milk that might have added, vitamins to it because they're synthetic and that can convert. I went so deep into this diet. I was so determined. I found an inner strength that I never knew existed. And I found willpower like you would not believe. I ate a lot of avocado. I ate a lot of hummus. I ate a lot of vegetables. And I also said to the doctor, how long do I have to do this for? And he said, well, probably a year or two, but it'll probably be for life because you're going to feel so good that you're never going to want to stop eating this way. And the irony is I felt so good that to this day I cheat. I love chocolate chip cookies. I'll have a sweet every now and then. But I eat such a healthy diet. Everything on our home is organic. I read every label, everything that I buy. I try to police my kids as much as I can, but, realizing life is balanced and they're going to do what they're going to do outside of my purview. But I really got better. And the most amazing change in me was my brain. So I had gone from a place of severe brain fog where my brain did not work at all to a point where my brain worked better than it's ever worked in my entire life. And, I'm very well educated, always a person who's thinking. But now I could think on a whole other level and I could write about it and I could make connections in a way that I hadn't before. So while it was challenging and hard, whether you're exposed to mold or not, everybody should go on this diet because it's incredible.
Okay, so I want to share for our listeners, nystatin is a prescription medication that you can get from a medical doctor that does kill off candida, which is a yeast overgrowth. However, I wanted to say a couple comments. As a medical intuitive healer, I recommend natural things to get over candida, and there's a number of natural supplements that do help to get rid of candida. And Mara listed a sugar-free diet, which can be helpful. But again, I am a big believer in going to the source. And it's my experience that I've had clients who've been on nystatin for years and on a sugar-free diet for years, and they're still struggling with the candida. It's so crucial that you find the right substance to actually get rid of the candida. And what I find is that a lot of times when people have candida, the problem is actually poorly digested protein, which goes to lack of hydrochloric acid in your stomach. So if your stomach is not producing enough hydrochloric acid, you're not digesting your protein properly, and that's going to lead to yeast overgrowth. So a typical thing is, when you put somebody in a yeast-free diet is no bread, no brewer's yeast, no sugar, no alcohol, this sort of thing. And that can be helpful. But again, it's so crucial that you go to someone, a highly trained practitioner who can read your body and figure out what's going on with you, because you can be on nystatin for years and on a sugar-free diet for years and not actually clearing the core issue. And personally, when I do understand and agree that many people do need to change their diet in order to heal. However, I find that I work with what I refer to as actual humans, and actual humans have trouble, being perfect in their eating. And that's why I find that it's so crucial, if I'm working with people with any kind of digestive issue, whether it's yeast or parasites, that we clear out the core issues, so that you do not have to eat nothing for years on end. And I can relate, years ago when I was in my early 30s and working on my wellness program, I ate no corn, no dairy, no wheat, no soy, no alcohol, and no sugar for about 6 years. And then I went crazy. It's so hard to, eliminate everything. So in my practice, what I do is I actually heal the gut. And I have a whole gut healing program that I put my clients on, and that resolves the core issues. And if you have yeast overgrowth, you're going to be sensitive to mold for sure. And there's a wonderful author by the name of Dr. William Crook, who wrote a series of books called The Yeast Connection in the Woman, The Yeast Connection. And I had the privilege of meeting him while he was still alive. He's deceased. And he and I spoke when I was writing my first book. I've written 2 books about how to heal depression without drugs. And as Mara mentioned, yeast overgrowth, when you have a candida overgrowth in your body, the yeast in your body is going to be producing about over 100 different chemical byproducts, which lead to brain fog and can cause anxiety and depression. So when you resolve your candida, and when again you go to the core issues, not necessarily just taking nystatin or not necessarily just eating this hyper vigilant diet for years on end, when you resolve those core issues, frequently you're resolving those mental, emotional issues as well, and you're going to be able to think much more clearly. So yeast overgrowth and mold sensitivity is a big factor in when I'm doing medical intuitive readings on people who are sensitive and who have depression and anxiety. Now, Mara, back to you about nutmeg aspirin. I know that since your healing journey, you're really passionate about sharing what works.
Mm-hmm.
So how can people participate? How can our audience participate in nutmeg aspirin?
Well, funny you should ask. Here you're telling everybody about how to heal yeast. I'm like, oh, please, Catherine, go on my site and post that, because all our content is user generated. So anybody can share whatever works, from really quick tips on how to heal a headache to a more complicated getting rid of candida protocol to I healed cancer. But it's really all of us crowdsourcing everything that we're doing so that together we can all heal. And for me, this has been an evolution. So I think I might have said this already, but the mold was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it woke me up and it ignited a curiosity that I needed to discover everything there was to know about spirituality. And then it became everything to know about the mind and everything to know about the body. And that curiosity has never faded. I read every single day and I'm a sponge. And I started feeling I was bursting at the seams with this knowledge. So I started blogging. My blog was doyourhw.com. And I discovered that blogging is a very lonely profession, and I felt very alone. But I also discovered that there was a world of people out there like me, similarly situated in that we were given a prognosis and told we were going to have these symptoms the rest of our lives, but they did something and they took charge of their own well-being and they got better. And then they were feeling so empathetic and had so much compassion for everybody else out there that they were blogging to help others. And I said, well, why don't we just bring all of us together, put us under one umbrella, and everybody share what works. So I encourage all your listeners to share their tips for feeling, getting, and being better. There's no one on this planet who doesn't want to feel, get, or be better. And together, let's empirically document what's working. We ask, when people post, we ask our community to react to the posts. So we're not standing in judgment. We're just saying these are possibilities. They're not cures or answers, but we don't say yay or nay to them. We let our community members react by saying it worked, nope, or so-so. The idea is we want to give users, enough information to discern whether or not they want to try something. We want to empower well-being. So to do that, as you know, Catherine, as I discovered, you have to be an active participant in your health. You can't delegate your health to anybody. Because as much as a doctor says, you have this, you have that, you got to take this, or that, one, either what they're giving you is going to have horrible side effects or some type of side effect. And two, they don't really know what's going on inside your body because you're the only person inside your body that knows what's going on. You're going to know when something helps to make you feel better. And there is no magic pill. There is no silver bullet. It is trial and error. It's a synergistic effect of many things coming together. And the beauty of nutmeg aspirin is that most of what people are posting are quick, easy tips. So they're really easy things you can try, whether it's adding cilantro to your diet for detox. I happen to like olive leaf extract whenever I have my candida out of whack, and I just take it every single day just to maintain, and I find that has been the most helpful for me. Or if people are taking apple cider vinegar every day, or lemon water with cayenne in the morning, or their green juice, all the things that you mentioned that you do to boost your immune system. It might be apple cider vinegar on one tip, and it might be lemon on the other one, but then you can choose and try it for yourself and see what works. There's no downside.
So, and one of the things that people can do to learn more about how to be healthy naturally is to follow the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio, because we have the top experts in the world talking about natural health. And again, going back to environment, if you have been struggling with your health for some time, you really do need to ask yourself, how healthy is my home? Another story that I will tell, years ago, I had a client and he was very worried about his baby. His baby had been sick since the day he was born. I did a medical intuitive reading for the father, and I identified a gas leak in their home. I told them where the gas leak was. And the baby had been sick since the day he was born, and the father had suffered from leukemia. And the father was actually a health expert himself. He was a personal trainer and a coach for triathletes, but he had cancer. And it was from a gas leak in his home. I told them where in the home the gas leak was. The gas company came out, found the leak. So again, we have to look at these larger pictures and realize that your environment has a big effect on your health. Mara, Landis, any final thoughts?
I just wanted to leverage off of what you said, and that, the environment is such a huge factor. Everything we put into our body, our thoughts, every input is going to have an effect on our well-being. So the more conscious you can be of what might be going on in your home, what might be going on in your life, because stress is a big factor in all this as well in our immune systems. So looking at everything from the holistic perspective is really looking at everything and seeing yourself as one entity, where you see your emotional state, your mental state, and your physical state, and you really see them as one.
Thank you, Mara Landis. You can find out more about her wonderful work at nutmegaspirin.com. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer and Amazon #1 best-selling author. Visit CatherineCarrigan.com and UnlimitedEnergyNow.com to find out more about me and my work. While you're there, sign up for my newsletter to find out more about natural healing. And remember, your environment is your most powerful factor and has a big effect on your health. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio.